Happy Friday. This is unusual for me. Usually when I'm starting the record button and I'm doing my little intro, it's for the podcast. So I'm a little bit off off kilter here. But this is not for Cozy Alchemy. This is, as I'm sure you will know, because I will have described it, I'm sure, adequately, I hope. This will be another edition in our Read to Me series. This is a series I had started back in December, I think, where I'd figured, I have a bunch of short stories out there. Why not try going through and reading some? Sometimes you get more hearing it out loud, especially from the author, for better or worse. And it's just a fun thing to do, especially to celebrate. And today we are celebrating the Cozy the Day Away sale. So if you're watching this not live or in real time, but on the day that it airs, there will be a link, I'm sure, in the show notes to check out the Cozy the Day Away sale, which is a special website put together by a wonderful, wonderful author in the cozy fantasy world. And it brings together a bunch of cozy fantasy books for ostensibly a one-day sale. I will tell you, since you're here watching this video, which is essentially behind the scenes, I will admit that when I schedule my books to go on sale for this one-day event, I actually schedule it for the whole weekend. So if you are watching this late, still check out the sale. You might find that other authors, like I have put their books on sale for more than just Friday the 8th of May, 2026. And also, honestly, it's just a cool website to check out and sign up for notifications from. No matter what time of year you're watching this, I believe the Cozy the Day Away sale is going to happen twice in 2026. So if you've missed it in May, I believe it's coming back in October. And of course, my newsletter will have info about that. The Cozy the Day Away site will have all the info you need. So that is that. We're celebrating that. And specifically what I wanted to do is celebrate fish. I don't know if all authors do this. I talk to a fair number of authors. Yeah, maybe I should start taking a poll. But I tend to refer to my titles by just whatever word in the title sticks out to me, because I'm thinking about the book so much as I'm writing it and editing it and then publishing it and blah, 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 blah. So I kind of develop what I realize might be an annoying shorthand, where all of my alchemical tales novels have a one-word abbreviation that I use for them. Same goes for marine magic. So I call it fish. It is properly How to Care for Cursed Fish. And it is book 1 in the Marine Magic series. The reason I wanted to highlight this one in particular today is it started off as a spin-off from the Alchemical Tales series, going back to a town that some of my other characters had visited at the Seaside, but I had really loved. So we go back. It is, appropriately enough, called Seaside. In Marine Magic, this series, we're following a different set of characters with their own, trials and tribulations as they're setting up a marine animal sanctuary. It was, like I said, it was kind of just like a fun side project. But one of the original Cozy the Day Away sales, gosh, maybe 2 years ago at this point, which is weird. That one of these first sales was kind of not necessarily a debut of the Marine Magic series, but it was kind of a first moment where I was, watching the sale, watching like what people were buying, and I was like, wow, fish is doing well. But it was one of those moments where I realized, like, oh, this series stands on its own 2 feet, not just for me, but for others. So I wanted to celebrate that. I am not going to read from the novel. So if you're curious about the novel itself, you can check it out. It's in the sale. And I'm sure it's also in the show notes. But this series, I find it more fun to read a short story, because then we'll have an ending, right? When we started the Read to Me series, I was doing the Carousel Capers stories, which I might still work my way through. That's a collection of short stories that all got together to start off the Alchemical Tales mystery series. So we may get back to them and read more about Red and her carousel horses. But for now, we are going to read How to Care for Secret Penguins, which is a bonus short story that comes after How to Care for Cursed Fish, but is free for my newsletter subscribers. So I wanted to pick something that if you are really inclined and really feel like being immersive with your reading today, you could potentially go on my website. If you're a newsletter subscriber, you know the secret password to use to access the free short stories. So the link and the password for short stories for newsletter subscribers is in every email that I send. It's also in the welcome email if you feel like signing up now. But so this story is on the website in PDF form, or it's also on BookFunnel. There are so many ways to get into the wonderful world of Beyond. Now, I am going to settle down, actually do some work. We're just over 6 minutes, so this is already a long introduction. And in the same vein as last time when I was reading the Carousel Capers, I have not read this story ahead of time. Obviously I wrote it, but that was, again, year and a half ago now, maybe more, my goodness. So I'm going to be discovering it. I'm also going to be reading off of my screen, because I don't have this one in print form. So apologies if I'm weirdly staring, not quite at the camera. And yeah, I think that is all of the preamble that we need. So, take a sip. Also very important, have your tea. Excellent. All my caveats and explanations are over. Let's get to How to Care for Secret Penguins. Part 1. In a Barrel. Immediate trip up, because the Marine Magic series is kind of fun in that each chapter in the novels, and I guess in this short story, each part starts off with a quote. I am not, trained narrator enough to just cue you in on that without saying it up front that, okay, we're starting off with a quote. Though its warm coastal climate means that the town hasn't seen snow in centuries, Seaside is known for its Yuletide lights and the annual boat parade. It is the perfect holiday destination for travelers with children. That is a quote from A Guide to Seaside for the Discerning Tourist, one of the several books that Sunlit collects during How to Care for Cursed Fish. All right, moving on properly into the story this time. Sunlit, you have to, said the young boy. His guardian's face was obscured by her large sun hat, but her sigh was not. But Fish, what if someone brings a new animal to the sanctuary? I'll have to take care of it. I can't promise. No new animals, Fish declared. He was not quite the average child. His skin was faintly gray, his head free of hair, and on his neck traces of gills. But his enthusiasm was entirely normal. You have to promise, he said. I'm going to be a mistletoe. Mistletoe, Sunlit corrected rather absently, as she was preoccupied with her own worries. I don't think... Promise! The little boy stopped dead on the boardwalk, glaring up at her over his ice cream cone. Sunlit was trapped. Okay, I promise, she said, privately reassuring herself that it was probably fine. After all, there were only 2 days left until Yule. How likely was it that any new animals would show up needing care? Later that afternoon, Sunlit Haven slumped against the doorframe of her life's current work, Marine Sanctuary, the one and only oceanic animal rescue center in Seaside. A wall of aquarium tanks stretched along the wall behind her shoulder. Light poured in through the barn-style doors at the back and side of the building, illuminating the wrinkles in her practical, baggy overalls. For a one-time bait shop, the sanctuary had become a very homey headquarters, complete with an exam room of sorts and a receptionist counter, plus kitchen, plus convenience shop. Curled behind said counter was Joy, a sea otter approximately the size of a hippo with a plush tail. Her long whiskers twitched under dark, kind eyes as she assessed Sunlit. What happened? Normally you love your walks with fish. I do, Sunlit insisted. As she moved into the safety of the shop's interior, she pulled her hat from her head and stripped off her light gloves. It's just, he really wants us both to come to this Yule play that his school is putting on. He talked about it nonstop. He's probably still talking Chip's ear off about it on their way home. Joy shifted, her ears pricking up. Adorable! And since you refuse to tell me anything about this landlubber's holiday, I'm glad there is a pack of children to do so. We call them classes, usually, Sunlit said. Safe from the sun's burning rays, her face was now visible, cropped pink hair atop a pale yellow forehead etched with worry lines, light pink eyes, and the faintest, wryest of smiles. And I don't refuse. It's just I never had a whole lot of time for holidays. People and animals don't just stop getting sick because it's a supposedly special day, you know. I know all sorts of things, Joy replied, as she made room for her friend to perch on the corner of the counter. For example, if Fish wants us to go, then we go. Yeah. Sunlit fiddled with her long sleeves. It had been nearly 8 months now since she and her seaside friends found Fish alone on the beach. Fish had been an integral part of Marine Sanctuary in the beginning, and even though he now lived with Chip and Chip's father, he was still a regular junior assistant with the animals. He'd settled into town life so easily that it sometimes made Sunlit jealous. It also alarmed her every once in a while to realize how much she loved the little boy. Abruptly, she asked Joy, "Are we spoiling him?" On a normal day? Maybe. But kits deserve nice things at Yuletide. Isn't that what people say? Besides, what we're really doing in this case is being there for him. And no matter how confident he may seem to you, Kit, he does still need that. Sunlit opened her mouth to make another correction, but thought better of it. Though she could live up to her name with youthful exuberance, Joy sometimes acted much older, particularly when calling both Fish and Sunlit the otter term for babies. That's Kit. Instead, Sunlit said, "That's kind of what I thought too. I did tell him we'd be there. I'm just worried. We don't have the staff to be taking holidays. What if something comes up here at the sanctuary? I know it's not that likely, but..." Joy made a show of looking at the tanks on the wall. A crab missing one claw scuttled along the glass wall in one, while nearby a Saturn snail with a hole in its shell was surrounded by slowly orbiting rings of sand. A trio of glow-in-the-dark guppies staying at the sanctuary while their family went out of town luxuriated in the quiet. In another tank, an oceanic salamander grinned its wide reptilian grin. "Okay, things are quiet now, especially with the Moonray babies gone," Sunlit admitted. "About that, did you take down the barrel they were in?" Joy asked. Sunlit tilted her head, confused by this sudden question. "No, I thought we should leave it up. It's nice to have the extra room on the annex, and anyway, it's pretty securely tied in place." "Odd," said Joy. "I went out on the pier to stretch my legs earlier, and it definitely wasn't there." "Impossible," Sunlit protested. There hadn't been any storms lately. In fact, winter in Seaside had been quite temperate so far, aside from the temperatures themselves, which were only barely on the cool side of tropical. Overhead, the sanctuary parrot, Biscuit, swooped down from the attic. "Impossible! Impossible!" he squawked. "Invasion!" I don't do voices, you guys. I can do just like a tiny bit of inflection, but I'm not doing a parrot voice. "Invasion?" Sunlit looked askance at Joy. "I still can't tell if he knows what he is saying," Joy mused, watching the bluebird perch on Sunlit's shoulder. "Who knows? But maybe the barrel mystery is one we can solve," Sunlit decided. "I'm going to go out and take a look at the annex." And I also am going to take this moment, because we're at a scene break, to apologize if you can hear like rustling in the background. That's my own animal companion, William. He's a small tortoise trying to escape his wooden house. All right. The annex was now the official marine sanctuary term for an old wreck marooned behind the bait shop. The bait shop itself sat at the head of a very old pier, while a new, much larger and higher pier, built up on a wall of rocks, had been put in just a few yards to one side. Trapped between the two piers, now lashed firmly to the supports beneath the pier and shop, was an unsailable ship. The body of the wooden boat was half submerged, which made it an excellent holding tank for larger animals. With her hat and gloves in place once more, Sunlit let herself out on the bait shop's back door and climbed down several steps on a rope ladder onto the boat's prow. In the afternoon heat, both the new and old piers were quiet. Sunlit took in her annex with a practiced eye. The only animals in residence were a trio of peach sea stars, which had been found on the beach, stunned stiff after a children's pier jumping competition had gotten out of hand. They'd be recovered and find their way out in a day or two, was Sunlit's guess. She moved past them carefully, making sure that her boots didn't create too many waves. The two halves of the barrel were, or were supposed to be, hanging off the other end of the boat. Sunlit maneuvered her way to the rear deck of the annex, hugging one side to avoid a platform on the left. She'd peered over the stern and seen that, yes, indeed, the barrels were missing before she realized something. There wasn't supposed to be a platform on the rear deck. Slowly, Sunlit turned to her left. As if on a multitude of tiny feet, the platform shuffled sideways. The platform, which she now saw closely resembled two halves of a barrel placed end to end. "What is going on?" Sunlit asked no one in particular. For 8 months, those barrels had housed a bunch of tiny rays and had never once seemed inclined to move. In response, one half of the barrel honked. Sunlit was spooked. "Joy!" "I see it." The otter sounded more interested than alarmed, her face poking out through the shop's back door. "I'm going to lift it up," Sunlit called back. "If there's something with teeth under there, maybe don't let it get me too bad." Moving with the grace and speed that came naturally to an otter of any size, Joy was already in the boat and peering at the barrel. Sunlit leaned forward, then with sudden confidence reached for the lip of the barrel and jerked it upward. Normally, a marine biologist or veterinarian making such a movement would expect the animal underneath to be shocked and still for a moment, just like the sea stars had been. Today, for Sunlit, this was not the case. Even before she could step back, she found herself awash in penguins? "Too bad," Biscuit squawked from the shop door with disapproval. "Too bad." Like I said, I've not read this in over a year. It's very fun going back and rediscovering old stories. All right, we've gotten to part 2, performing acts. And we have our second quote. There are many varieties of penguin recognized and beyond. Many prefer to live in cold climates to the far north and south. They are often very social creatures, and some have proven to be quite intelligent. From Traverse's Guide to Marine Vertebrates, Invertebrates, and Magical Outliers. Penguins, Sunlit said to Joy, rather helplessly. They'd managed to herd the birds inside, but no more. The next step was for Sunlit to perform an examination of each penguin, one by one, but this was made complicated by two things. First, Sunlit's extreme reluctance to admit she had already broken her promise of no new animals to fish, and second, the fact that the penguins were moving in chaotic formation. One hopped a little, another hopped a lot, and another hopped as high as Sunlit's shoulder, and at the same time, they were moving in a precise circle around her boots. In truth, there were only 4 of them, but they were moving in such a blur of black and white feathers that Sunlit might have said there were as many as 14. You're good with birds, Joy said doubtfully. From her refuge behind the counter, she eyed Biscuit, who was now perched atop Sunlit's hat and screeching at his black and white brethren. This was not helping matters. Maybe they'll leave, Sunlit said. Joy's whiskers twitched in remonstration. Now I've never heard you say a thing like that, Kit. I know, but how am I going to explain this to fish? What if they need round-the-clock care and I miss the Yule pageant? Sunlit gestured desperately over the beaks and squawks. What even are they? Where did they come from? The circus? Round-the-clock corralling might be more like it, Joy said, neither agreeing nor disagreeing as she watched the mini parade continue. They seem very active. Leave, Biscuit parroted. At once, the penguins ceased hopping. They arranged themselves in an orderly line from tallest to shortest, each orange beak tilted up in Sunlit's direction. Huh! Sunlit set her hands on her hips as she looked at the 4 identical sets of beady eyes. Maybe they are trained. What kind of circus has penguins? Joy had been to exactly 1 circus during her summer with Marine Sanctuary, and she had not been very impressed. I don't know, Sunlit said. But she was calmer now. These were clearly civilized birds. Now that they were standing still, she could see that each wore a bedraggled piece of costume. One had a stained yellow cap, one a fraying purple scarf, one a torn red vest, and the last a set of green earmuffs that looked decidedly soggy. If someone had dressed these birds, Sunlit reasoned, then someone would be responsible for coming to pick them up. When she explained her thoughts to Joy, the otter was not quite so hopeful. They smell like they've been nesting in seaweed for days, she said, with a delicate wrinkle of her nose. Maybe now that they're quiet, you can give them baths. Sunlit took off her hat, dislodged Biscuit, and settled in to work. It took the better part of the afternoon to examine and clean each penguin in turn. Seeing how malnourished they were, and finding little cuts and sores among their feathers, Sunlit privately began to agree with Joy. These birds had probably been on their own for days, or more. Finding and patching up each injury took a while, as did undressing the penguins. Not a single one was happy about being parted from its costume, even though Sunlit explained as soothingly as she could that all she wanted to do was put the clothing through the laundry. Though she knew now that the penguins would have to stay overnight, at the very least, Sunlit refused to give up hope of keeping her Yuletide promise to fish. Leaving the penguins to feast on an assortment of shellfish, with Joy to look over them, she practically ran through the streets of Seaside and made it to the bookshop right before closing time. Seaside's bookstore was a wealth of information, not only about novels, but about town history as well, especially town events. Breathlessly, Sunlit climbed to the second story, where she found Rachel, the store's owner and resident scholar. Rachel wore bright green glasses, which accentuated her cat-like eyes and ears. Tea break, sorry. Her shoulder-length hair was shockingly violet, particularly against her tawny complexion. She was short and very matter-of-fact, and somehow she always made Sunlit feel rather bashful. But today, Sunlit was on a mission. "Rachel," she said, even before she'd reached the deck, "is there a circus in town?" Rachel adjusted her glasses as she looked up. "That's only in the summer. At Yuletide, they do the boat parade." "Are there any, animal performers as part of the boat parade?" Sunlit tried. "Not particularly." Rachel pursed her lips. "The focus is really more on boats." "Of course, right. Only, are you sure there aren't any kinds of animal performances going on, or supposed to be going on?" "Quite sure." Rachel looked up at Sunlit over the rims of her glasses. "Are you asking for a particular reason?" "No." Sunlit felt herself flush and immediately felt guilty. "I mean, don't tell Fish, okay?" Rachel's yellow-green eyes were light with amusement. "He's a bit young yet to be reading most of what I have in stock." "No, I know, but just on the off chance you see him." Sunlit twisted her hands together, biting her lip. "I have penguins. That is, there's a troop of 4 penguins that showed up at the sanctuary today. They must have come from somewhere, right?" "The North Pole?" Rachel suggested. "I mean, I think someone must be looking for them," Sunlit corrected, unsure if the bookseller was joking with her or not. "So do you want to make a found poster?" That was an entirely reasonable suggestion, but Sunlit blanched. Posting flyers all over town was not her idea of keeping a promise-breaching secret quiet. "No, not yet, thank you." "You sure you haven't heard anything?" "About missing penguins." Rachel rose an eyebrow. "Maybe try the police station. I haven't heard anything." "Okay," Sunlit said, with the air of someone who's been told to kick rocks. "I'll swing by there on the way back. Thanks anyway. And don't tell anyone I asked." We're at another scene break, so I will take the chance to admit it's so funny reading Sunlit's voice after I, been editing a lot of Red stuff lately, and Sunlit's very different. Okay. If it was difficult to get Rachel to react with urgency to the idea of surprise penguins, it was downright impossible to get junior police officer Sabrina to. After doing 3 or 4 rounds of, "Yes, I want to report found penguins," "No, I don't want to broadcast where they are now," "Yes, I know penguins are very unusual here," "No, I don't know what anyone else would be doing with them," "Yes, I know they ought to be at the sanctuary, but I really want them gone by Yule," Sunlit finally gave up. She scrawled a note to the same effect and left it for Sabrina to give to the chief police officer, a coastal elf who went by his last name, Ebb. He'd been very involved with Fish's introduction to Seaside, and Sunlit hoped fervently that he would somehow understand. She returned to Marine Sanctuary feeling defeated all the same. For the second time that day, she slumped against the door frame. This time, though, she made sure to furtively close the door first. But the shop floor was empty. Sunlit turned to Joy. "Where are they?" The otter tipped her snout towards the ceiling. As she looked up, Sunlit became aware of a constant tapping noise. "What's that?" "They ate all my fish," said Joy, first and foremost. Then Biscuit started yelling again. This time he said go. They've been doing that ever since. They enjoy it, if you ask me. "You mean they're..." Sunlit hesitated to suggest something so silly, but the sound from the ceiling could not be denied. "They're tap dancing?" "Is that a thing people do?" Joy asked. Sometimes her knowledge of landlubber peculiarities was lacking. It could be part of a show, Sunlit said. Joy nodded sagely. Well, it's not a show I particularly enjoy, so I put them upstairs. You put them? Sunlit wiped her hand over her face, trying not to imagine Joy lifting each penguin in her paws and popping it through a hatch into the attic. Did you try giving them a counter order? Like, what was it that worked earlier? Leave, Joy confirmed. I tried, but they started up again. Sunlit did her best to think. She couldn't, in good conscience, put the penguins outside. They were injured, and fish might see them, and most compellingly, she now realized that their stunt with the barrel was most likely an attempt to hide from the sun's rays. Though night had fallen now, it was still cooler inside than outside. She wasn't actually an expert in penguin typology, but these penguins did seem to be the cold-loving kind. They also couldn't be around the other tanks if they were going to hop and jump and tap dance at the drop of any hat. Many animals came to the sanctuary because they needed rest, so upstairs did make sense. The only problem was something crashed above, and Sunlit winced. She'd never been so keenly aware of the downsides of living in the attic above the shop before. The next morning, Sunlit woke bright and early to find herself, once again, surrounded by penguins. This time they were quiet, though. In fact, they'd nestled atop her blankets and were peacefully sleeping, while various feathers and tails and wingtips and beaks kept Sunlit pinned in place. She didn't have to consider her situation for long. Joy was also an early riser, though thankfully Biscuit was not. After some rustlings downstairs and a few whisper-yelled cries of, "Joy!" the tap door from the shop opened, and the giant otter's eyes and ears appeared above the attic floor. Sunlit waved one hand at her current situation, which was the most she could do without disturbing the largest of the penguins. Joy considered this development with serenity. You could just get up. But then they will too, and honestly, I think they must need the sleep, said Sunlit. How would you feel if we were about to leave for the Yule pageant? Joy pointed out. Sunlit flopped her head down on her pillow. Don't remind me. That's tomorrow afternoon, though. How are things looking for today? Is the shop okay? Still standing, Joy reported cheerfully. A bit warm, however. Warm? Sunlit groaned. The air conditioning spell must have failed again. I tried to turn down the temperature last night for the penguins, Joy finished. Her nose twitched. Has it occurred to you, Kit, that they like you? Who? The penguins, Joy insisted. Yes, maybe they like you a lot better than whoever taught them all those tricks. I don't know. I'm really not sure how much they understand. Obviously they're intelligent enough to know all kinds of routines, but just then a knock sounded below. Fish delivery, a familiar voice called out. Joy's eyes lit with a hungry sheen. Breakfast! Between the pounding at the door and Joy's enthusiasm, there was no keeping the penguins asleep. One by one their heads popped up, and then the curious honks began. Then Sunlit rose, and they were flapping around her, hopping higher and higher. In a moment of desperation, Sunlit dove for the attic door and only barely managed to close it behind herself. Above, forlorn honking could still be heard. Running her hands through her hair, in consternation as much as in an effort to look more presentable, Sunlit walked over to the side door. Joy was already there, receiving a basket of fish. Also there was Chip, who worked with the local fishing boats, and, of course, the actual fish beside him. Sunlit nudged Joy out onto the pier and pulled the sanctuary door closed behind herself, doing her best not to look nervous while she hid in the building's shadow. "Top of the morning," Chip greeted her, with his customary good-humored smile. With wolfish white ears and tail and thick white hair, he didn't seem like the average sailor at first glance. But his family had been sailing the waters around Seaside for generations, and he couldn't have been happier with his inherited profession, or, indeed, his newfound duties looking after young fish. The little boy peered over his own bucket of shellfish, eyes wide. "Sunlit," he asked, "are you okay?" "I'm fine," she replied, with what was definitely an anxious grin. "Just, not busy, that's for sure." "Looks like our marine biologist slept in," Chip said to Fish, as he gently took the bucket from the child and set against the sanctuary doorstop. "Joy's got the rest of your order," he told Sunlit meanwhile. "Right. Could we possibly increase our order?" Sunlit asked, with one ear trained on the shop. Could anyone else hear the honking? She wasn't sure. "Increase it, huh?" Chip tilted his head. "Sure, the catch has been good lately, but what do you want with all the extra?" "Oh, it's just for today," Sunlit said, "and maybe tomorrow, if we could double it." Chip whistled. "What are you planning on doing? Putting on a feast?" "Oh, yeah, for Joy. Joy's very hungry lately," said Sunlit. Normally, Sunlit was abysmal at lying, as evidenced by her nerves. But in that moment, Joy looked back at them over her shoulder, a fish dangling from her jaws, and very much looked the part of starving otter. "And it's Yule?" Sunlit added, a little desperately. The warm-hearted Chip just chuckled. "Sure, no problem. I can bring over more later, after I drop Fish off at rehearsal. Right, buddy?" "I'm a mistletoe," Fish informed Sunlit, his round eyes shining. "You will come and see me, right? And Joy, too?" "Of course we will." Despite her worries, for a moment, Sunlit's heart melted. She smiled back at Fish sincerely. And of course, at that moment, there was another crash inside. "What was that?" Chip's pointed ears perked up. "Nothing." Sunlit winced as Biscuit began yelling. Say, Chip, do you know of any boats going north soon? Like, really far north?" "It's almost Yule, remember?" Chip replied. "Around here, no one starts long voyages like that at this time of year. Maybe in another 10 days or so when all of the Yule feasting is over. Why?" "Just wondering," Sunlit said, trying to hide her disappointment. Just, thinking about orders for the new year." Chip grinned. "Excited for your second year in Seaside?" "I guess I am," Sunlit admitted, smiling back. Though to herself, she added, "I just hope Fish isn't angry with me before it even starts." We're at another scene break, and I just want to point out, Fish is not, Fish is a very happy child. Sunlit's just very anxious. All right. Later, once Joy was fed and all the other animals looked after, Sunlit enacted a plan. "Okay," she said to Joy, who was stretched out in front of the sales counter for her customary slow-day mid-morning nap. "I'm going to put what leftover fish we have into one large bucket, and I'm going to let the penguins down. That is, you might have to let them down in the same way that you got them up there." "Here?" Joy cracked one eye open. "Can't they eat up there?" "I'm going to lock Biscuit up there," Sunlit said. "Hopefully that will limit all the screeching and tap dancing and breaking things." "But then what?" Joy asked. "And then we'll have to you'll have to look after them for a bit. Just a bit. I have to find some way of getting our air conditioning spell working again. I was thinking of going over to Arietta's to see if she has a spare." "Not a bad idea," Joy admitted grudgingly. Arietta ran Beachy Bakes, a bakery on the boardwalk nearby. As an experienced business owner with lots of ingredients to store, she was probably more prepared than the newly minted marine sanctuary was. "But why can't I go?" Because AC spells are usually housed in snow globes, Sunlit reminded her companion. When no reaction registered on the otter's face, she explained, very breakable bits of glass, like the one we already have. Sunlit gestured to the sad-looking snow globe atop the tanks in the far corner, and Joy sighed heavily. Fine, I will admit that carrying fragile things is not my forte. Can't we just put them outside? The sun, Sunlit reminded her. As someone cursed to burn incredibly easily, she felt a certain sympathy with the penguins in that regard. This really isn't their climate. They'll recover much faster indoors. If you make it too comfortable, they'll never want to leave, Joy warned her. Maybe just keep them occupied, Sunlit suggested, unable to face that reality and reluctant to leave her friend in the lurch. Maybe let them play with that rubber ball Fish left behind the counter. Joy's whiskers twitched. So they can break more things? The tanks are magically protected, Sunlit said. And if they get the old AC spell, well, it didn't work anyway. I'll clean it up when I get back. I'll only be gone a minute. If you ask me, at this rate, it won't be the penguin watching that keeps us from the Yule pageant, said Joy. It'll be the cleaning. Okay. As it turned out, Beachy Bakes was not open, but Arietta was inside nonetheless. After a bit of frantic knocking, she let Sunlit in and explained that she was busy cooking up special snowflake-shaped cookies and miniature Yule log cakes for the pageant and following boat parade the next day. The reminder dripped down Sunlit's spine like ice water. That's great, she said, trying to feel it. Listen, do you have a spare AC spell? I could pay you for it. We just need to borrow it. I told you that once you put one in, you'd never want to be without it, Arietta told Sunlit. A gnome as tall as Sunlit's thigh, Arietta reigned supreme in her little kitchen. Her tuft of blue hair matched the trim and the mixing bowls on the low counters. A ladder in the corner led to storage that wrapped around the room like a practical balcony. Sunlit stood in the doorway from the bakery's main room, trying her best to keep out of the way. Of course, I do keep a few spares, Arietta went on, but one of them went on the fritz last week. I only realized it because I was doing my annual routine check. I marked the date on my calendar and everything. The best helper is organization, isn't that right, dear? Absolutely, said Sunlit. She actually did agree and felt only more ashamed that she hadn't arranged a backup for the sanctuary yet. But until the hottest part of summer, the bait shop had done fairly well with open windows and air drafts, especially as it was practically built over the water, and no one expected it to be chilly inside. No one, of course, except some very lost penguins. What about your other spare? Sunlit asked. Is that one okay? Oh, it's right as rain, said Arietta. Only I loaned it to Egade last week during the heat wave, and I haven't got it back. I could go get it, Sunlit offered, with some reluctance. Of all her friends in Seaside, Egade was the one most likely to see through any ruse she might try to make up. Would you, dear? Arietta turned to smile at her while whisking up a batch of icing. Keep it as long as you like. See you tomorrow. It's just started raining. Egade was the captain of Seaside's lifeguards, and he looked the part. A dark-skinned merperson whose tail became legs covered in deep blue scales when he was on land, he was ideally suited to maintaining safety on the beach, not least because of his penchant for the rules. When Sunlit found him, he was standing beside the lifeguard station with his hands behind his back, lecturing some beachgoers on the dangers of riptides. At any time of year, Seaside was a tourist destination. As the couple walked away, Egade turned to Sunlit with a long-suffering look in his purple eyes. He ran one hand over his bald head as he said, "Why doesn't anyone realize that danger doesn't take a holiday?" Figuring the question had to be rhetorical, Sunlit launched into her purpose for bothering him. Arietta said she'd loaned you an air conditioning spell, and that I might be able to use it for the sanctuary if you're done with it. We've been using it for the kids' Yule rehearsals, Ige said, since they're practicing on the beach, and some of them have big costumes. He gestured, and Sunlit peered around the lifeguard station to see that there was, in fact, a huddle of children at the far end of the beach, hopping around, not unlike the penguins. Fish was among them. It was adorable, but also worrying. Why are they practicing outside? She asked, thankful that she convinced Joy to keep the penguins inside the sanctuary. Because the pageant is outside? Ige crossed his arms, his tone clearly conveying, "Don't you know this already?" They'll be up on the boardwalk and the audience will be on the sand. Then everyone can watch the boat parade afterward. Why do you need an AC spell? If it's just for one new animal, you could get it a scarf. Sunlit's forehead creased beneath her sun hat. I could what? There's a new stand on the boardwalk that sells them. Arietta didn't tell you? It's run by a couple of pixies. They charm the stuff so that when you're wearing it, you feel cold. It's very popular with the tourists. Ige glanced out at the beach again, and once more, Sunlit followed his direction. She realized that there were, indeed, an unusual number of loungers who had added scarves to their tropical attire. Ige added speculatively, "Dunno if it'd work on a fish tank, though." "No, I don't." Sunlit bit her lip. "If it's just for the sanctuary, why don't you just open the doors and let the wind blow through like last spring?" "Because penguins will spill out," Sunlit just barely stopped herself from saying. As they stared up the beach at the sanctuary, Sunlit racking her brain for a reasonable-sounding excuse, and Ige meditatively shifting from foot to foot, something happened. The side door of the sanctuary, the one facing them, seemed to vibrate for a moment. Then it visibly shook. And then, before Sunlit could even process what she was seeing, the upper half of the barn-style door flew open. An orange rubber ball sailed through the air, straight towards the beach. And sailing after it in perfect formation were 4 very loud, very excited penguins. Tea break. All right, here we go for the conclusion. This is part 3, The Winter Witch. And we have our third quote. "Penguins can dive really deep. They love cold water and snow. If you ever see a penguin at Yuletime, be sure to give it some squid." From the Children's Encyclopedia of Deep Sea Creatures, which was Fish's contribution to Sunlit's library. "Well," said Chip, an iced chocolate in one hand and a pageant playbill in the other, "I guess we should have known you'd do something like that, Sunlit." "Like what?" "Like make everything way too complicated," Ige said. "It really wasn't my fault." "It was," said Joy, who'd come up behind Sunlit's shoulder. "But see, everything turned out fine." The 4 of them were milling about on the beach, waiting for the children's Yule pageant to begin. They were joined by a considerable crowd, nearly all of Seaside, in fact, both locals and tourists alike. Plentiful string lights on the boardwalk lit up the twilight, illuminating cheerful, expectant faces. Sunlit tugged at her sleeves. "Imagine her thinking we would cast her out," Chip said, chuckling. "Imagine not realizing that it's the season for forgiveness," Ige agreed. The comedy duo continued. "Imagine not thinking Fish would be ecstatic about meeting a new creature. Imagine believing she could keep a secret so long." "If you don't both stop," Sunlit interrupted finally, "I'm going to tell Fish that mistletoe means lovers should kiss." That was a good one for Sunlit. Chip blushed under his tan, but Ige did not move away from his side. "Is that what this play is going to be about?" Joy mused. "I thought kids this age were too young for that kind of thing." They are, said Ige, but he smiled all the same. Just wait, it'll start any minute. There's the director. Sunlit felt another wave of mortification as none other than Officer Ebb walked out onto the makeshift stage. I really had no idea it was him, she whispered to her friends. Why would it be him? Why not? Chip grinned as he whispered back. He's been doing it for years. Welcome, everyone, Officer Ebb began, his voice booming over the crowd. His police experience made him a natural director. Everyone fell silent at once. Thank you for coming to Seaside's 12th Annual Children's Pageant, and please help me welcome some very special guest performers who will be playing the part of our animal chorus this year. He swept one hand to the side of the stage, and in a perfect proud line, out toddled 4 happy penguins. Dressed in brand new hats and scarves, charmed to keep them nice and chilly, they bowed and cavorted for the crowd. He could have invited them to join the play before they got loose and interrupted the children's rehearsal, Sunlit whispered with one last bit of reluctance. He did try to stop by the shop, but you were gone, Joy reflected. Oh, well, this way it makes for a fun surprise. Sunlit briefly thought that Joy would put a positive spin on the fact that she'd lost control of the penguins, who had in turn raced straight down the beach and put the children's rehearsal out of control too. But the otter was right. Order had quickly been restored, and the penguins had been incorporated into the pageant to the great delight of the children. All was well. The various characters took their places on stage, acting out a Yuletide fairy tale where various plant spirits, like holly, oak, and Sunlit's personal favorite, mistletoe, tried to convince the winter witch to bring back spring. It was the animal chorus that finally convinced her, the penguins doing an impromptu trick of balancing on one of each other's shoulders that could have melted anyone's heart. At least it certainly pleased the other actors and the crowd. When the children were done, Fish led the parade of penguins over to where Sunlit, Joy, Chip, and Ige were waiting on their picnic blanket. All around them, families were settling into place to look out over the sea. Just as the last penguin was settled, boats began sailing past. They came up from the marina, each more covered in lights than the last. Some set off little fireworks or played music from magical speakers. Chip, Ige, and Fish had all helped Chip's father decorate his boat specially. It was covered in string lights arranged to depict sea creatures. That's amazing, Sunlit said as the boat sailed by. She'd been so preoccupied with penguins, she'd had no idea what her friends were planning. Is it your favorite? Fish asked. From somewhere, Arietta most likely, he'd managed to collect a large iced cookie. It's definitely my favorite, Sunlit told him. Around them, the penguins honked in agreement. You're my favorite, said Fish, beaming, and so is Chip and Pa and Ige and Joy and the penguins. What are their names going to be? Did you know I am a penguin? Sunlit laughed. I guess if you're a penguin too, then you should name them Fish. After a moment of careful consideration, Fish reached out to touch each penguin one by one. This one is Sparkle, this one is Bright, that one is Mary, and this one is Cookie. Oh, Sunlit grinned. The penguins were nodding and preening. Was it just her, or did they seem pleased with their names? Maybe they can be the town's official welcoming committee. Officer Ebb already likes them, Joy added confidently from where she was curled along the back of their blanket. Chip and Ige, for the moment, were in their own world. Sunlit? Fish asked as the last boat sailed past. Yes? I know you were worried about your promise, but it's okay. Maybe it wasn't good I made you promise, because it made you sad, and we wouldn't have met the penguins. Sunlit hugged Fish into her side. Sometimes we really wish things would go a certain way, but we just can't control everything, huh? Not like the Winter Witch in your play. Even she had to learn how to play nice, Fish said, his eyes crinkling as he smiled up at her. Joy's whiskered nose tickled them as she leaned her head into their hug. "Is that what Yule's all about, then?" "Something tells me you knew that all along," Sunlit told her, while Fish said stoutly, "Everything's better together." Sunlit smiled down at the little boy and, on impulse, kissed the top of his head. As the last fireworks lit up the sky, the raucous sound of penguins honking mingled with the crowd's cheers. The end. Like I said, it is so much fun to go back to these stories. And we do have at least one other right now, holiday story from Seaside. So maybe for a future Read to Me segment we'll do that, or maybe we'll go back to Carousel Capers. Well, you could leave a comment saying which you prefer, if you like. And for the meantime, I hope you have a lovely Friday and have enjoyed this little bit of Yule in May. Not quite July, but almost. And I will talk to you next time.